go ahead and get started. Good morning. My name is Alec, and welcome to Point Lobos State Natural Reserve. As you can see today, we are on the kayak, and we're going to be paddling around, exploring this beautiful place. And it is an incredible morning to be out here. It's probably about 55 degrees, just a slight breeze, 7 miles an hour off the northwest. Common central coast of California in the springtime, and we're going to be exploring this awesome ecosystem that we're floating above right now called the kelp forest. And it's going to keep it pretty brief today, probably around 30 minutes. I'd like to keep it nice and short. Whether you're here with your class, welcome, or you're here just on your own trying to get that ocean fix, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today. This is just one of many horizontal learning programs you can access. They're free. They're available every month from the desert sands of Anza Borrego to the redwoods, the shores of Lake Tahoe, and here at the central coast of California. So the game plan today is to paddle around. I just want to kind of get centered in this place. So I'll turn off my Bluetooth audio and just kind of leave the microphone here for you all to pick up the sounds of the ocean, the birds, the wind. And we'll do that for about 5 minutes just to get you oriented for where we're at. Then after paddling around, we're going to explore and investigate a mystery object I have here. It's a mystery object I pulled from this place somewhat recently, and we're gonna investigate it. And then finally, after our mystery object investigation, we're gonna talk about what's going on here, what I'm floating above. So first and foremost, I kind of want to get you oriented geographically. So I'm going to share my screen and show you on a map where we are. If you've been here before, you know how amazing of a spot it is. So this is, of course, a California State Park. There are 279 of these California State Parks, and we're pretty dead center on the central California coast. So south of the San Francisco Bay, if we're zooming in here, and even south of the Monterey Bay, just south of the Monterey. I'd say this is definitely the greater Monterey. So if you're on Highway 1 going down towards Big Sur, one of the last stops before you're officially in Big Sur region is Point Lobos State Natural Reserve. And it's a peninsula of land, all that green area you see jutting off to the left, jutting west to the ocean. It's a state park that was created in 1933, and it's about 450 acres of land. It's about 450 football fields, roughly. And off to the left, you'll see a couple titles: the Point Lobos State Marine Conservation Area and the Point Lobos State Marine Reserve. This is the ocean portion of our reserve here, and that's a much larger portion. That's about 8,000 acres, or about 8,000 football fields worth of area. So there's a lot more ocean here. And look at us. If you zoom in on my little GPS icon, you can see we are, in fact, in the ocean portion. So this is a California Marine Protected Area. It's a state marine reserve, and it's one of the oldest California Marine Protected Areas. I believe it's the second oldest. So there's a lot of life here, a lot of diversity. It's just incredible place. So first things first, like I said, we're gonna just paddle around for about 5 minutes, and I'm gonna turn off my Bluetooth and just leave the microphone on for us to take in all the sights and sounds. Here we go. We got some trash. So,
all right, I hope you enjoyed that little cruise. I know I did. Sometimes it's just the best thing to do. Let nature do the talking for me and just enjoy what a magnificent landscape, seascape this is. So now I wanted to sort of center us and think about what it means to be a good observer of nature. As you may have seen, the title of this program is called Ranger Training. And as a ranger who does education here at Point Lobos, one thing I'm always trying to do is observe as much as possible what's going on in the park. So I kind of wanted to relay some of those skills that I've learned while I'm here. And it's really simple. It's stuff that anyone can do anytime, whether you're in a natural environment, urban environment. Just noticing the things around you is a very rewarding experience. So I hope you're able to notice some of the terrain, the ocean terrain that we were gliding over, the glassy surface, or sometimes it was rippled, sometimes there were some waves. There was clearly a lot of things floating around us. That would be the kelp forest that we'll be talking about soon. Maybe you heard some birds off in the distance, or just the roar of the ocean. Such a nice experience. So now I wanted to investigate that mystery object that I pulled from Point Lobos the other day. And with this mystery object, this is sometimes a nice thing to do with someone else, with a partner. So if you have someone, you can talk back and forth. But if you don't, then you can just use a piece of paper and a pen, just something to jot it down. Because it's nice to be able to actually write down or say out loud the things that we're going to be talking about here. So we're going to investigate this object right here that I pulled from Point Lobos. And in our investigation, we're going to be doing three things. One is we're just going to try to notice as much as we can. So for the next 30 seconds, try to notice as much as you can about this object. And when I say notice, I mean point out its texture, its shape, its color, its size. So as an example, with this object here, if I were to be making observations about this, noticing stuff, I would say, well, there's a couple different shades of green here. We have a light green and a dark green on top. Shiny silvery band that goes around. In terms of size, it's about as tall as my head is, but it's pretty thin. It's a thin cylinder. And in terms of texture, it's hard, not soft, and kind of has a metallic feel. So you'll notice I didn't point out its name, which I think we all know is a coffee mug. So we're going to try to not name this object. If you know what it is, try to just let that exit your mind and pay attention to all the little details about this thing. And this is an exercise that we're going to start off with this small object, and then we're going to get bigger, talk about a whole nature scene in observation. So for the next 30 seconds, whether you're with someone or by yourself, try to point out all the things that you can notice about this. Remember, size, shape, color, texture. What are you noticing about this mystery object? Okay, what are some of the things that you notice about this mystery object? Perhaps it was its color. It's got some reds and browns, and further down some black. On the back side, some white. What about its size? It's probably about the size of my face, about the size of my hand. What about its texture? What do you think about its texture? Do you think this is soft or hard? Yeah, I would say it's probably a little more on the harder side. It's kind of crunchy. And then on this side, it's almost a different texture though than this side. So we have two things going on this mystery object. One side is not the same as the other side. And this side's a little softer, a little less crunchy. So we got its texture, we got its color, we got its size. What about its shape? What would you say about its shape? I'd say it's kind of like an oval. It almost looks like a Smurf's hairdo, or like a kind of like a beard. It's kind of how it's shaped. All right, so that was part one. All the things we noticed. So now we're kind of orienting ourselves about how to notice nature around us. And part two is, what questions do you have about this object? What do you wonder about it? As an example, one thing I wonder about this object is, where did it come from? I may have found it someplace, but I don't think that was the place where it originated. Where do you think this comes from? So what questions do you have? What do you wonder about this object? Take another 20 or 30 seconds. Talk to the person next to you. Write it down. What questions do you have about our mystery object? All right. I'm going to paddle back a little bit because I'm being pushed towards shore. The tide's starting to rise here. It's an extremely low tide this morning, about negative 1.4 feet, which is about as low as it gets. But what stuff do you wonder about our mystery object? What questions did you have? One question I had, aside from where it comes from, is, does this serve a function? Does this do anything, or did it do anything? Maybe you asked if something lives inside of it, or lived inside of it some time ago. Kind of like Nemo lives in that crazy tentacle thing in Finding Nemo. Did something ever live inside of it? What function did it have? How big do these things get? Is this a small thing or is this a large thing? Was this ever alive? So it's questions like those that can really get our curiosity going and make us wonder about the natural world, makes our minds open up. All right, so that was part two. And finally, part three here. So we did what we noticed, we did what we wondered, and now, what does this object remind you of? What does this object remind you of? What things in your everyday life have you seen that remind you of it? A couple examples I gave you earlier kind of reminds some people of like maybe a beard or a Smurf's hair. Not the same color, obviously, kind of same shape. So what does this object remind you of? What have you seen in everyday life that this reminds you of? All right. I'm sure a lot of you right now are saying, Alec, that reminds us of seaweed, of coral. All right. A lot of you are probably like, well, obviously that probably came from the ocean. What else does it remind you of? What other things in your everyday life? For me, it also reminds me of dried ramen noodles. That's what I think of. Or it also reminds me of kind of like brains a little bit. Kind of reminds me of a brain. It certainly reminds me of tree roots. What did it remind you of? All right, so that was part 3. Good job, everyone. We did part 1, part 2, and part 3 of that. And that's just an exercise, part of ranger training we do to orient ourselves with the natural world and get curiosity going. The number one goal of all these programs for me is to inspire curiosity, to get you into the natural world and ask questions and find out more about it. So that was, this is our mystery object, and I want to show you where our mystery object actually comes from. So I'm sure a lot of you are curious, or maybe perhaps some of you already know what that mystery object is. All right, so I'm actually, my kayak is right next to some of the same species. So I'm going to pull some up onto the kayak here. All right, you ready? What's this? Yeah, it's seaweed, exactly. And another name for it, more scientific name, would be kelp. This is kelp. And the specific species is giant brown kelp. It lives all around here in Point Lobos. It lives farther south and all the way further up in Northern California as well, this giant brown kelp. And it really is giant. It grows up to 200 feet tall in some places and can grow in the right conditions this long in one day. 24 inches in 24 hours, folks. That's how fast this can grow, this giant brown kelp. Of course, it does need the right conditions for that. Most kelp is not going to grow that quickly. But you probably notice this thing and this, they look kind of different, right? And as we said earlier, I said this kind of reminds me of roots. That was a hint. So what part of the kelp do you think this is? Yeah, it's the bottom of the kelp. So this is like the root system of our kelp. It keeps it grounded to the bottom of the ocean so that the wave energy doesn't carry this away. So this is our top of our kelp here. And I kind of want to show you a photo of what this looks like underwater. So you can see it above water here. Here, I'll change my camera view. You can see it floating all around me. All right, but it's kind of hard to tell what it is. It just looks like a bunch of seaweed floating, right? So let me share with you what it looks like under the water. And here we are. This, friends, is a giant brown kelp forest. An underwater forest. Pretty magical, right? And just like there are forests above the water, on earth, on ground. There are forests underwater as well. And just like forests above the water contain lots of life, so does this forest. It's a vibrant, productive ecosystem. And in this ecosystem, we know that over 1,000 species rely on the kelp for survival. Whether it's eating the kelp or living in the kelp or finding a mate in the kelp or hiding from predators in the kelp. The kelp forest is a very vibrant, it's almost like a busy urban environment, like a city. Think of a New York City or a Los Angeles or Beijing or London, Mumbai. These are busy cities. And in this giant kelp forest, there's a lot that's going on all at once, a lot of life underneath my kayak here. And just for a little science breakdown, I wanted to show you quickly the parts of the kelp so you could understand what it looks like from top to bottom. So you saw the bottom of the kelp. We call that the holdfast. That keeps it glued to the bottom of the ocean floor so it doesn't drift away in the waves. And you also saw the top, the blades. Those are like leaves. And then we have the stipe above the holdfast, which is kind of like the trunk of this kelp. And then the gas bladder. And just a challenge for you, just food for thought. Why do you think that kelp needs to have these gas bladders? And gas bladders are just pockets of air, little air bubbles. Why do you think it needs to have these air bubbles? I'll let you think about that, and maybe you can investigate that after our program today. I won't tell you the answer, but just food for thought. I'll also show you what that actually looks like. So this is one of those gas bladders, little air pockets. Why do you think the kelp needs that? All right, so there are lots of animals that live here. Some of the more common ones that you probably know of are the harbor seal and our sea otter. So these are our harbor seals that live here. They're actually recently giving birth. So there's a lot of pups around, a lot of babies, ones that are being born and learning how to swim, learning how to hunt. And their mothers actually leave them just after a month. So they're independent very early on. And these harbor seals, a lot of people, they think they look lazy because they're always hanging out on these rocks in the daytime. But the reality is they're nocturnal, so they're always hunting at night. So they just come on these rocks to rest. And then we have our sea otter, and these sea otters, I know, very, very cute. They live here year round, just as our harbor seals do. And they're also giving birth. So they're also here at Point Lobos. So these are a few of the familiar faces you'd see. We have all kinds of fish. We have leopard sharks. We have giant sea bass. We have cabezon, rockfish, lingcod, a whole bunch of life. Stingrays underneath the surface, jellyfish, octopus, squid. It's a very, very busy ecosystem, as I said before. All right, so the last thing we're gonna do, part of our ranger training, is I said we're gonna observe something small and then observe something big. We're gonna do that right now. So if you have something to draw and or color with, go ahead and get that now, like a piece of paper or a whiteboard, pen, pencil, color pencils, markers, whatever you got. We're gonna do a little bit of nature journaling real fast. I'm going to turn my camera around to focus on what we're going to be looking at here. And just like otters do when they don't want to be moved by the waves, I'm going to hang on to some kelp so we can kind of keep a steady picture here. Okay, I'm going to secure some kelp. I'm going to turn my camera around, and we're going to take about 2 or 3 minutes just to draw this nature scene here. I'll do my best not to move. Of course, I am on the ocean. There are waves attempting to move me, but do your best just to try to notice every detail. Just like we were noticing every detail on our kelp holdfast, our mystery object. I'd like you to try to investigate every detail of this nature scene. Every shadow, every contour, every sign of life. Go ahead and try to do that now. I'm going to turn off my mic again like I did at the beginning. And we're going to take about 2 or 3 minutes to do this. All right, and as we're finishing up here, I just wanted to point out a couple of details that you may have seen, some of us may not have seen. So I'm going to try to point that out real quick. On the other side of this rock, there's something. So we're going to go to the other side of the rock real quick, and this is the last thing we'll do before signing off. Gotta sneak up. There, my friends, is one of our harbor seals. Harbor seal hanging out right there. That's that nocturnal animal I was talking about. All right, I better move real fast so as to not run into this rock. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you had a great time here investigating our kelp forest and checking out the beauty of this Point Lobos morning. If you have any questions at all about anything Point Lobos related, you can drop me an email. My name is Alec. Again, I'm the interpreter here. And our email is pointlobos@ports-ca.us. So that's Point Lobos at ports-ca.us. And then you can reach me for any questions, comments. And I just want to thank you for hanging out with us today. I hope you enjoyed some magnificent views, just chilling out on the ocean. Hope that got your day started off right. And with that, thank you and have a beautiful rest of your day.